how tough was it or how difficult compared to your life or career now?
Okay, yeah. Well, after I did my undergraduate in Canada, and I did some postgraduate studies in Italy and worked in Milano for about a year. Then I went back to where I was brought up, which is Canada, Toronto. And I worked about 7 years as a designer in an office there. And I started becoming disillusioned with design at that time. Because much of the work I was doing were with companies that didn't really seem to care about design. But the times have changed drastically now, because really design is the only brand differentiator. So I think back in the 80s, companies didn't realize how important design is. And it was less respect for design, let's say. So finally around 1992, I decided to just teach and become academic. And I taught for 2 years at several universities and decided to move to New York. In order to survive in New York, I also continued to teach at the Pratt Institute and started my practice. So now my practice has been going 22 years. And the first 8 years were very difficult and very, very hard to survive. Because even though I was in a place like New York City, culturally, New York is a city of commerce and art, but not design. And in a way, in general, America's culture is not in design. So unlike countries, let's say, like that have a great history of design, like Italy, France, Sweden, Denmark, Spain, it was difficult as an American designer to find companies and clients who were really interested in doing important, successful, and progressive work. But in the last, I think, after about 10 years of practicing, I started to become quite established. And the great thing about being established, obviously, is that you can pick and choose more of what you want to do. So I have hundreds of solicitations from around the world, but I'm fortunate that I can edit and decide on doing things that I think have some opportunity of real contribution. So I think that's how things have changed. Also, since I started and now, design is much more of a public subject. And every corner of the earth is interested in design. And there's so much to do to improve the world. So that's, I think, the differences.
You work for many companies, you design many products. Where, in which part of your business can you say that you have the most freedom?
Well, that's interesting, actually. Because in every typology or category, freedom is dependent on the type of client you have, not the typology. For example, if I'm making a building, if I have a client who's quite open-minded and interested in being progressive, then I can have more freedom. Or if the budget is better, I can have more freedom, let's say. I could be designing a line of drinking glasses where the criteria are so restrictive that there's so little freedom to redo the glass. So it's again dependent on the brand you work for.
Since you've traveled all around the world and you visited many countries and worked in many countries,
Yes.
And after your visit to Budva today, which other town or tourist or otherwise metropolis in the world would you compare Budva to?
Oh, that's quite interesting. Also, I'm working in 41 countries.
Radi u 41 zemlji.
And today, when I was touring Budva,
Obilazio Budvu,
I got a strange mix
dobio je neki čudan,
of some very diverse places.
čudnu mješavinu utisaka koji su ga podsjećali na razna mjesta.
There was a little bit of a sense of Tel Aviv, Israel.
Ličilo mu je na Tel Aviv, Izrael.
At the same time, I felt a little bit like where I'm working now also, Miami.
Osjeti me malo i od Majemija.
But at the same time, for example, when I'm in Old Town, I almost felt like I was on the streets of Venice.
Osjetio je Veneciju.
And then even more so because I'm so familiar with Serbia, being, my wife is Serbian, I've done a lot of work there. I've been there many, many times, and I have an apartment in Serbia, etc., that I felt very much that I'm in a Serbian town too. So I like this sense of almost, for me, a little bit of an eclecticism or a multicultural sensibility a little bit. And in the city, I see some work, some new buildings, and some things that are very contemporary, and then we have this, beautiful 2,000-year-old culture.
A opet vidi ljepote kulture koja je stara više od 2000 godina.
And I find those places quite stimulating and inspiring.
Ta mjesta stimulišuća i inspirativna.
And more so, unlike, for example, in a place like Venice,
Od Venecije,
where it's very closed in the sense of it's stuck in that period,
kao da su zaglavljeni.
I like a place that has this sense of mix, that I feel like I'm alive today, but I can appreciate at the same time the history.
Koja se vidi ovdje.
I think Budva has that kind of spirit.
Cijeni historiju.
I guess like a little bit like your slogan, your tourist slogan of fulfill, is that you kind of have all that, a mix of the old, the new, the mountains, the sea. So I think that in a way makes it quite a special place, obviously.
Jako, jako specijalno mjesto.
Well, when Nikole contacted me to come, I was thrilled actually, and I came on my own account because I, first of all, feel very connected to this culture, and it's like a second home. It's part of my family now.
Dočekao poziv sa ushićenjem.
And
Sam je
and the last time I was here was 8 years ago, and I wanted to see if in 8 years things had changed from what I remember it to be.
želio je da vidi da li se išta promijenilo od prije 8 godina od prethodne posjete.
And frankly, there's for me nothing more thrilling and exciting than to be able to put my fingerprint in Budva, and
Iskreno ništa mu ne bi pružilo više zadovoljstva nego ako bi mogao neki svoj otisak
but
ostaviti u
but not from an ego point of view, but more that I could help the culture and help contribute to making the place more beautiful.
ega, već zbog želje da doprinese ovoj kulturi.
And on many levels to help contribute to develop the business of Budva,
Da se poboljša posao, poslovanje u Budvi
and to make it more attractive as a tourist destination,
na turistička destinacija.
and to feel like I'm adding to people the spirit of the place, to people's lives.
Da osjeti da doprinosi cijeloj energiji ljudi ovog mjesta.
Well, no, I think no one's going to change the world alone. So
Može sam da
so it sounded quite, let's say, I think egocentric to say that.
možda zvučalo malo egocentrično,
But at the same time, the intent was to say that design can change social and human behavior.
da promijeni u društvenom smislu ponašanje ljudi.
And design is what
Dizajn je
progresses humanity.
ono što navodi na ljudsku rasu na napredak.
Whether we design cities,
Bilo da dizajniramo
or buildings, or systems, or services.
ili usluge.
So my intent was to really make design more of a public subject and build an awareness
Bilo da dizajn pretvori u nešto, u predmet javne rasprave.
that we can change this world through good design.
Da može svijet da se promijeni preko dizajna.
Now, I don't know if I've done it or not. I've worked quite hard since I wrote that book. I feel like I've made some inroads, but I think there's so much more to do.
Utabao put, donekle, ali ima još puno toga da se radi.
fortunately, I've inspired many others to have the same mission.
Sretan zato što je inspirisao mnoge druge.
So I hear this expression all over the world now
Tako da taj naslov
in relationship to design.
svuda po svijetu.
So I think collectively we are all changing the world through design.
Znači kolektivno svi mijenjamo svijet kroz dizajn. Since your wife is from Belgrade, you are in a way connected to this region. How acquainted are you with the design architecture situation in the region? How much attention is given to it, if any?
I would say that, you know, there's some, let's say, a lot of competent architecture, but very little, I think, that's really outstanding.
Ali vrlo malo da su izvanredni.
And I think, little that's on a real international caliber.
Malo da su nekog internacionalnog kalibra.
So I see very, you know, nice, competent, clean, glass, concrete buildings.
Uredne, stručno urađene zgrade. od
But I
betona i stakla,
think it's all quite conservative and quite safe, and
konzervativno i
I think there needs to be some more monumental projects taking place in this whole region.
projekata da se radi.
I think somehow, you know, Serbians, Montenegrins, and in the Balkans in general they're playing it safe.
Crnogorci ovo više
You know?
vole su sa bezbjednosti.
Almost there's sometimes a sense, sorry to be so honest, but
Osjeća da
there's a sense of almost insecurity, let's say. And when people are insecure, cultures are insecure, we tend to act slower or act
ljudi žele da budu sigurni, oni
conservatively.
da budu konzervativni i da sporije reaguju.
But the reality is you should just embrace the culture,
U stvarnosti trebalo bi jednostavno da se
which is a fantastic history,
kultura, fenomenalna istorija,
with very intellectual people,
ima puno vrlo vrsnih intelektualaca,
and with a very, how can I say, an appreciation, let's say, for fine art, culture of creativity,
mnogo ljudi koji cijene fine
and
umjetnosti.
embrace that and show yourselves off to the world,
Trebati to prihvatiti i hvaliti se time.
and be proud of your culture.
Naravno biti ponosan na svoju kulturu.
Proactive.